All right, so we'll come back to this quiz later on, but Sarah El-Gabali made it for a previous plenary, and she's reactivated it for the most recent plenary and for the next few weeks. So it's quite a fun way to figure out the style of person you are within the Research Data Alliance. And don't worry if you've never heard of RDA or you haven't participated yet, feel free to take the quiz anyway. Now, to start off the presentation, I'll just start with this title slide, which covers a lot of things. Now, what this is a celebration of the RDA and of my perspectives as first a working group member, then on to becoming a working group co-chair and an RDA EOSC Future Domain Ambassador. So within all of these contexts, I feel that on some small way, I've really engaged with this research data community on a number of different levels. And as part of the work that I've done, I've created my own small slice of the research data community within the Fair Sharing Community Champions. And I wanted to provide to you my experiences and perspectives regarding the building of this community in the context of my ambassadorship. Of course, it's continuing now, even though the ambassadorship itself has finished. And so what do I take from this community building and engagement from the first 18 months? And what can I sort of pass on as my thoughts as a result? I'm very happy to get questions anytime in the chat, but to get a little idea of how much background I need to go into, if anybody would like to just, I don't know what the right, raise your hand or provide an emoticon or an emoji. If you do know what the RDA is, please put in an appropriate smiley face or a raised hand. Ah, a heart, lovely. So we're getting hearts and thumbs ups and many different things. We've got 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going around 7 or 8, 9. So we've got maybe a quarter coming up, about a quarter people who know the RDA and who have been involved in it. So I will talk briefly about what the RDA is before I get started. Thank you, everyone, for your votes. Let's go ahead and get started with what the RDA is itself. So we'll go past the quiz. You'll get an opportunity to talk about that later. And here I share a screenshot from the Fair Sharing Working Group within the RDA, which is now in maintenance mode and for which I took my first co-chair position. I'm also co-chair of the Data Repository Attribute Working Group, which is also just about to finish. And so what does it mean to be a part of the RDA? I find personally that it's this really vibrant, really exciting research data community where I can go to get a wealth of knowledge about all sorts of stages of research data lifecycle and data management. And from a fair sharing perspective, it really complemented our needs over the past few years, providing this pool of domain experts that are already highly connected within their own communities. So you have each individual's community, and then you have the broader communities of which they're also a part, of which RDA is really a highly connected node. I would have to ask, I'm going to pause for just a moment and say, thank you for the question about the quiz. It's absolutely amazing. What I can do is I can, if you contact me after with the contact email, and I'll just go ahead and share the details of that one more time. I can give you Sarah's email address or put you in contact with her, and you can find out what the licensing is on it. It's absolutely amazing quiz. I think it's really cute and really useful. So the RDA complements our needs. And under its auspices, Fair Sharing has matured and our Community Champion program has launched. And together with EOSC itself, which is the European Open Science Cloud, we have really managed to create a welcoming community that I hope will be sustained for many years to come. And as an example of this, I want to provide a couple of quotes from 2 of our Fair Sharing champions. And you'll see throughout my talk, I've added quotes from a variety of our different champions on what they feel the champion program has brought to them. And what they're saying here is that the community is a really valuable part of the champion program. And as it was launched on the auspices of the RDA, you can see how the RDA provides a lot of context and greater depth to the program itself. I want to briefly diverge now that I've explained the RDA and explain what I mean when I start talking about fair sharing. As the fair sharing content and community lead, I am responsible for the data quality and for outreach within our project. Our project is run from University of Oxford. It's a completely academic project and is dependent, as so many academic projects are, on grants. What we do is we provide a registry that describes databases, standards, and data policies within all subject areas. And not only does it describe these things, but it also describes the relationships among them. And that for me is the most important part. And you'll see me talking about relationships a lot in this presentation today, because both the social relationships we gain as part of a community like the RDA and the relationships in terms of digital objects that all of our research data has. All of this is connected, and research and relationships are at the sort of core of all of the work that we do. And so that's why it's my favorite part of fair sharing. We can talk about the standards that are implemented by databases, the recommended databases and standards in a particular funder policy or journal policy. We can talk about which databases share data. All of this is captured within a sort of resource landscape within fair sharing. And we have lots of people who come to fair sharing. They can be loosely grouped into three groups. The first are the consumers, those who come to fair sharing to find a resource to deposit their data in. Those who come to fair sharing to describe their resource. So if they own a database or have developed a standard and they want to make it more visible. And finally, we have two tool developers who come to us to use our API, most commonly for fair evaluation and assessment, but also for data management planning. And they use the metadata that we store about these standards, databases, and policies. We have over 4,000 records and over 1,300 contributors. Those are our champions that I've mentioned before, and I'm going to talk about for the rest of the presentation now, but also our maintainers, those individuals who own the particular records describing databases, standards, and policies. Now, to move forward onto a discussion of community, which is what you're all here for right now. There are lots of different research communities. And within those communities, there are many that are focused on engagement and outreach, especially with regards to research data management, to open and fair digital objects. And there are also professional organizations, universities, and funders that also advocate for openness and fairness. So when you're in RDM and you are thinking about developing a community of your own, if there's a particular need, you're trying to decide if something's out there that can already support you, or if there's something you need to develop, what are the sort of questions you should ask? And what are the ways that you go about building that community once you've decided to create one? I can't give you a full answer. There are lots and lots of organizations out there who can. I point you directly, particularly to the CSCCE down on the bottom left, which provides a lot of training around community engagement and management. And if you want to learn more structured information, then you might want to look through them. But I will talk about my perspective on how I decided and how our project decided we needed a new community within fair sharing, and how we went about growing it with the help of all of these other existing resources. So this is taken from the CSCCE. This is their life cycle, sort of social impact network model, and they use it to describe communities that are about social impact, creating a large social impact. But I'm modifying it slightly to use it to ask the right questions to decide if you need to build a new community. So in terms of connections, before you even can answer the question about if a new community is needed, you need to create those relationships, that word that I'm going to use over and over again. You need to choose which existing communities are relevant to you and your professional role. And you need to join and create relationships. That will give you an idea of what's already out there. And then you can work to see which of those communities align with your needs. You find those that have a common need to yours, identify if there's any gaps existing in those community spaces. And if after all of that, you find that it's best still to create your own community to fill a particular gap, you know by then what your purpose is, that isn't being fulfilled by existing communities, and you can move on to the next step, knowing that you will have some kind of buy-in because you've explored the community landscape already. So this is a slightly different community life cycle, also presented by CSCCE. And what you have here is a set of defined progressions, the creation of a community, the establishment of that community, when that community has already been established and matures over time, and ultimately might get to a point where it actually splits and forms sub-communities or extra communities that are about specific subtasks. And I find this is a really useful way to look at community building, but it's not exactly what I see when I think about the research data community that we're all a part of. I think that there's something missing. First of all, I'm less interested in terms of what I need out of community development in the splitting off of additional communities, the mitosis part of this image, and more interested in those relationships, once again, that I've been talking a lot about today. And so what I've done is I've modified that community life cycle that they've provided and added a step, and that step is in the top right where it says build relationships. And because I'm going to keep on banging on about it over and over today, because I think that nothing exists in isolation. And what we need to do when we're looking at community building is try to maintain those connections from the very beginning of the community build process right through to when it's already mature. You have to keep coming back to those relationships. So I'm going to take you through a few examples now before we get onto any discussion. And it's going to be broadly categorized into these 4 sections that you see on the life cycle here. So first of all, we're looking at the building of relationships. And this is where I said nothing exists in isolation. And that's true of the individual and true of the communities that we are a part of, whether that's our organization, an infrastructure, a professional body, or any other kind of community that you might be a part of. And oh, sorry, I missed. Yes, Sarah. Oh, Sarah, you have joined the call. You wouldn't believe people are really enjoying your quiz. I've already linked to it at the beginning. I think you weren't there for it, but
yeah, sorry, I just joined. But that's wonderful to hear.
So this is the lovely Sarah, everyone. I'm very happy to pause, and I just noticed in the chat. So Sarah, someone has asked what the licensing is for your quiz, because she'd love to use it.
Oh, that's a good question. At first, just my initial instinct to say CC by 4 and just go for it. I wasn't able to attach a license to the quiz itself in the tool I've used, so please feel free to just cite us. So it's me and Allison and the RDA. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Anelda, yes, it's no problem. Honestly, I'd much rather pause where people have interest and answer questions than have you all glaze over if I'm just constantly talking at you. So although this is a structured presentation around these aspects of the community life cycle, I'm very happy to derail constantly. It's absolutely no problem at all. So thank you very much, Sarah, for your kind CC by 4. And I know it's sometimes hard with these quiz software things to actually get what you need in there. So now we're back to relationships, and I wanted to just give some examples of how our champions have found relationships to be very important. A lot of them cite building of relationships as the reason they become a member of our champion program, and others say that they want to reach out and extend existing relationships and create a discussion. And so these are all aspects of relationship building that are just key to a community and to its development throughout its life cycle. I had to include Arnold here, honestly, guys, partly to keep you awake and partly because what he says is really important and not something you'd usually expect of a Republican, whether or not you agree with his political beliefs. I think this is a really good point. You know, a lot of people tried to hold him up over the years is the idea of the self-made man who comes across from Austria and pulls himself up by his bootstraps. and becomes Mr. Universe or whatever he became, and then an action icon. But he is very clear, as he was this commencement address where I took the tweets from, that he isn't a self-made man, and that at every step of the way he couldn't have done what he did without all of the people and his network that supported him. And I think that this is something that I keep in mind a lot throughout my career in research data. And I want to take it back just one step from the relationships of the individual to the relationships of our research objects. And it's the community of digital objects and their relationships that really elevates research. You can't really do research in isolation. You always have to build on what came before. You always want to, I hope, promote those whose work you used and the way in which you engaged with previous research. And so this landscape of digital objects, the relationships that are created, are really core to research itself. And this is why fair and open have gained so much traction, because we want ways of describing those relationships, of pointing to these unambiguously to these various digital objects, and to make sure that we can make proper use and reuse out of them. Researchers do need community to enact the research data lifecycle. I'm sure you've seen a lifecycle like this over and over many times in your research data career. And it's the standard way of that people represent what happens in the planning, creation, and publication of research data. And the more you look at it, the more you realize how much community is a vital part of many of these stages. From the management of data, the evaluation of data, the archiving of data, dissemination, and of course, the reuse step can only happen with other people in your community seeing that information and wanting to make use of it. So no matter where you look, community and relationships are vitally important, both to the data being produced and to the people themselves. Now, I also want to point out that it's sort of part of the FAIR principles, but I wanted to be explicit about duplication of effort. It really makes sure you being up to date, not just with the most recent publications, but also with what's happening generally in your community, really helps stop you do the same thing twice. You don't want to create another community that already is doing something that another one is doing. I've stolen this as just an example from an old blog post I did on Ada Lovelace Day. And what I did is I started out a shared network of all of the women in science that I knew. And then I invited those women to create their own networks and apply it to the same graph. And so we ended up with this marvelously interconnected relationship graph of women in science, because it was Ada Lovelace Day. And it's just a lovely example of how just, a few people seeing that blog post and connecting outward really generates a community almost instantly. And so that sort of shows you the community that you've got, even if you don't realize. And community creates a stable research environment. So what you're doing is you're creating a space where it's sort of safe to work. You know what you're doing, you know that what you're doing will have value. And this is an example that I use in my FAIR sharing slides, because these are the people that we engage with regularly: publishers, funders, alliances like the RDA, Force 11, EOSC. And so all of these are a part of what makes FAIR sharing remain relevant. And so this is where we look to when we're building our own community. I also want to say that community ensures diversity in a way that just being a part of a single project or not moving outward and examining what available communities are. Because I admit I've taken some faces from our community champions. I know some of them are here today. They're a little bit small for you to see. And all I've done, I haven't even put their own institutions here. I've just put the infrastructures and RDA and various other sort of community institutions and organizations. And I've just put a few. I've put in EOSC at the top, Fair Sharing, RDA, and the UK Reproducibility Network. And you can see even with just a few institutions or infrastructures and a few champions, we're already getting a heavily interconnected network. And so, this is the exemplification of nothing existing in isolation. No matter where you look, you're going to find someone you know, or find a group that you're aware of, and that will help build your own work. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is Deb's. She's also one of our champions, and this is at the RDA plenary in Gothenburg. You might, if you've been to that plenary, I know a few of you who have, those pastries were lovely. And so we took a picture with the pastries. I don't think any of us minded. It was absolutely lovely to see people in person. And these plenaries are really important for broadening your network and your understanding of what's available out there. And so I do strongly recommend, if you aren't already a member of the RDA, to go ahead and join some working groups. All that happens when you do is you start getting the emails. There's no obligation to do loads of work. And it really gives you an idea of all the different work that's going on out there. I also want to talk a little about the relationships in the ambassadorship themselves. Sarah, who you've just heard talking about her quiz, is another one of the RDA domain ambassadors. There were 14 of us funded through EOSC Future over the last 18 months to 2 years. And EOSC and RDA wanted to provide this sort of opportunity for various disparate scientific communities to contribute to the development of various RDM tools and standards and bring expertise from a particular domain. And it really, really allowed us, each of us ambassadors, to tailor our particular 18 months to what we felt was a need, a gap, you might say, in the research data community. Oh, yes, and this is the perfect time, since I'm talking about ambassadors, to say that I will talk about a slide. I have another slide later on that has Sarah's quiz on again. So if you missed it, you'll get the link up again. And also, I would love to hear at that point if you guys would pop into the chat what your various roles were that you got from the persona quiz. That'll come in just a little while. This is a slide made by Beth or Sarah or the other Sarah. I'm not actually sure who made it, but I credited all of the people where I got the slide from, just to be on the safe side. And it was the way that they advertised. It wasn't Sarah El-Gavali, but it might have been Sarah Jones or Beth. And it just shows all the different ways that EOSC and RDA wanted to build this community of ambassadors. And this is quite a small community. And this is another important thing to say. RDA is vast, and that is one of its strengths. And when they created the ambassador program, it's a fraction of the percent of the membership of the RDA, and that makes it a different kind of community, but no less relevant for all of that. And it really allows this sort of specialist tailored programs to come to the fore of the RDA in a way that I hadn't really seen before, and it was really very exciting. The ambassadorship program, at least that funded by EOSC Future, is now finished, but we're working, Sarah and Beth and I are working on a new interest group within the RDA that will work as a sort of alumni resource of ambassadors, because there are gaps. I was just talking about finding gaps in community. You may have a particular domain that you wish had more representation in RDA. There was just a reply to one of the RDA tweets about this very webinar, where someone asked if there was an RDA in Africa working group. And Connie, I did have a look at the time. I couldn't see it, but I may have missed it. But there are always going to be gaps. So what the alumni from the Domain Ambassador program are going to try to do is to be there to help connect those people who want to join the RDA but aren't sure where or aren't sure how. And there's lots of other early researcher interest groups and people who are new to RDA. There's ways to get training and things in the lead up to each plenary, but as a sort of stable resource and allowing us to leverage our position as ambassadors to help more people with an RDA. We're just trying to find our feet there. So anybody has any suggestions about how RDA domain ambassadors could help people, please do let us know. Thank you, Connie. RDA Africa is a region currently being discussed amongst the community. I think that's fabulous. So I can reply in that manner, or you can to that tweet from earlier. We're moving on from building relationships to creation. And this is the creation of those communities. This is starting from a good foundation, checking your goals, make sure they're clear, make sure you have a strong message. And the quotes I've chosen for the creation section is about those who want to proliferate knowledge, who have clear ideas about what they want to do and have come to the champion program with those goals in mind, just as a little nod to our champions. Here I'm drawing from CSCCE again, which talk about the various ways in which you can connect with your community. And this is a really lovely table, which I'm not going to go into too much detail about, but the quote's there, and we will share the slides afterwards as well as this recording. You need to, depending on the type of community you have, you may connect with them in different ways. Anything from broadcast, which is on the left, all the way to something that is really collaborative and almost one-to-one. And sometimes you can mix these different types of messaging and communication. And as you build your community, you need to think about the ways in which you're going to communicate with them. Is it going to be just one of these? Is it going to be a mixture? And certainly for the Champions program, because we were always going to have a relatively small number of people, it's going to be much more along the collaborative or co-creation side of things. Activity at the create stage in your particular community when you're building it is going to start out low. And as they say here in this quote, you might wonder if you're doing the right thing. And this can be normal for quite a substantial amount of time. Give yourself time to develop it. It may seem like as I spoke with Connie before this started, shouting into the void, but don't give up. And, remain kind and positive and keep on promoting and advocating. You'll have to do most of the work at this sort of stage. And what I've done here is I've shown some of the welcome and the information we give to people who are thinking about joining the program. And this is the sort of message that you will need to write when you are creating your community and trying to gain membership. Here's our membership at the moment. And it's just a general comment about how providing relevant information across an entire research community is really hard. And the more you can leverage the relationships from your community outwards, the easier it will be. And that's why these kinds of relationships that I've been talking about, and how at the creation of our community champion program, we were already looking to the relationships our champions had when we were looking to see who we would be including in the program. And just keeping in mind that you always have one eye on the relationships really will help things. Also, in terms of creation and your message, we wanted to make sure that our message was clear about what the champion program was for and what it could do. And so this is the message that we still promote and that we created at the time that we created the community about what the champion program was for. When you were a fair sharing champion, you curate content within the registry. That's fabulous, and we love it when people do that. You can contribute to educational material, just like the one here that has Deb's, the lady with the pastry from the earlier slide. She helped us make this one. And also you can gain expertise, attribution, networking, because we're trying to make this a two-way street. We're asking for your help on a volunteer level with curation and educational material, but in return, you get expertise, awareness of your work within a wider context, networking, and of course, attribution. For every single bit of work that you do with us, your name gets put on in the database, on the infographics, things like this. And here's an example, a closer up version of what it looks like at the bottom on the authorship list for these infographics. I love attribution. It's absolutely my absolute favorite part of running a community program. At every opportunity, I try to make sure that I name the people who are doing the work with us and showcase what they're doing. If we move on from creation to establishing, and this is where you have already made the community, you've got your first set of people, and now you want to grow and really sort of solidify the network and community you've got. This is about increasing engagement and membership. It's about creating more awareness. And yes, I mentioned a few minutes ago, but just for Louisa, we are recording this right now. And Connie, the lovely Connie, who is here from the RDA, will make sure that it all gets put onto the RDA website afterwards. So here we are at establishing, and we've got the lovely David and the lovely Geneviève, who are talking a little bit about what the champion program means to them. And this, for them, I've chosen because they're talking a lot about this engagement and membership, and the fact that the mentoring is really important to them, and the meeting with other like-minded professionals is also really important. Also, a part of establishing is really maintaining in the nicest possible way your brand. Now, we're all nonprofit academics, or at least that's what we are in Fair Sharing. And so brand is not something we think of in terms of profit, but we do think of it in terms of how can we make sure that people know what we're doing, because we are a service for the research industry, research data community, and we want to make sure that people can make use of our service as much as possible. That is our entire goal, is to be useful. So at this stage, when you're in the establishment phase of community building, you're going to have community members who are more engaged, and you'll start feeling like you're doing less work. I have to say, this is absolutely true. When we first launched the Community Champion Program under my ambassadorship, it was a lot of broadcast. It was emailing groups, it was tweeting, it was asking different infrastructures and through different social media routes to come and look at our program and apply if they wanted, and to see the benefits of it. And then when they first started, there was training, there was learning what each individual champion wanted to do, because we allow them to define their own route through the champion program. And after we got that first batch and they got settled in, it started to feel more like a conversation and less like this sort of broadcast that you do often get in the early stages. And if you look through the tweets and the blogs and the news items, what's happening in this phase, in the established phase, is your members are starting to produce output. And so they're writing news items for you there, because they're wanting to advocate for their own domain, for their own organization, and show how their organization is using this community or can make use of this community. And they want to shine a light on the work their community, their sort of home community, is doing, and the work that they're doing. And we want to do that too. So we ask our champions to come and write about their work and how it pertains to fair sharing. And we promote that. And we also try to keep engagement on social media, although I have to say Twitter's made it really hard in that regard, because it's changing into some weird thing, and I don't really know what's going to happen in the future. So we're also on Mastodon, and we use LinkedIn. And so we have lots of tweets, we have news items, and here's our most recent news item about the first year. Well, actually, there is even more recent one now that's showcasing all of the new champions from 2023. You can have a look on our blog and see all of that information. The establishment, I didn't spend too many slides on it, because it is about sort of settling into the community, and there are lots of different ways to do that. And I can't say honestly that we're fully out of established and into mature yet, but I feel like we're heading that way. And so I do want to spend a little bit of time on my cat's come. I hope I can't tell if you can see her. She's heard me talking on maturity nonetheless. And so here we have Joy and Yojana, who are talking a little bit about attribution and engagement and building on earlier collaborations. And so this is where you're sort of getting more extended benefits as we work with the various champions to see what else we can do. So there's the first thing, what they do when they first come to us, and then there's the sort of extension of that. I'm gonna have to move the cat. There we go. And as part of this maturity, and since so much of it is around showcasing your members, she keeps coming back with attribution. I want to showcase some of the ways in which we attribute our champions. Just as an example, there's lots and lots of different ways to do this. And I really don't want to say this is the only way. This is just the way that we found so far. We're at this mature stage where community has become a little bit more self-sustaining. People are suggesting additional champions, suggesting events. Adam, who's here today, has come up with a great idea for events within his extended home community that he can bring from the champion program. And it really feels like a lovely, supportive environment. On the image here, what I have is one of the types of attribution that we do. This is the Orchid Awards. So they go under, it started out in a different section and it somehow moved. But if you look on the Champions Orchid pages, you'll see under professional activities that they have their awards from the Champion program. And it shows what years they've been active, because it's an annual award and you can choose each year whether you want to remain or whether you want to become an alumnus yourself. And and so what we're doing here is we're sort of trying to make it really obvious in multiple what you would call it, multiple locations of the work and the effort that our volunteer champions do for us. And I want to take a slight diversion for a moment, because the lovely Lindsay Anderson, one of our first champions, has been with us since the beginning, and who has done a large proportion of the edits that our champions have been doing, made a couple of slides for us to tell what it means to her to have integrated her domain of expertise and her job and her home community with the Fair Sharing Champion program. And she's highly involved within the RDA as well. I highly recommend, if you're interested in multiomics, to take a look at the working group that she's I think she's a co-chair of. I want to get that right. Yes, there she is. She's a co-chair with David Mullock and Tim Vanden Bosch. And what she's done is she's joined so many working groups within the RDA, and her work is just fantastic. And she's leveraging the knowledge she's gained within the Fair Sharing Champion program and apply that within RDA working groups. And you can see that from the workflow that she's made on the right. This is from the multiomics working group, where she's going to bring in content from Fair Sharing as part of the working group's outputs. And here as well, Lindsay has talked about within her own institute, which is Pacific Northwest National Labs, and how she's developed a DMP best practices within PNNL that includes references to fair sharing to ensure accurate and up-to-date information for those standards and databases that are recommended for use when creating DMPs within PNNL. And more broadly speaking, in terms of attribution, I showed you before one of our infographics that our champions co-author on. And here are the set in blue that are currently available at fairsharing.org/educational, all of which have been co-authored with our champions. And the ones in gray are the ones that I haven't quite finished yet, but they will be coming along. And here's an example, again, of the infographics. What we've got here is the Fair Sharing in a nutshell, which gives an overview of the different type of people. Remember, I said we have consumers, we have producers, we have tool developers, and all the different stakeholder groups that come to Fair Sharing. Just as an example of the outputs that are produced as part of maybe a slightly more established and leaning towards mature, maybe not quite there yet, program. And this slide tells you how much we get out of our champions, and it's absolutely astonishing. And I'm regularly just bowled over by the fabulous work of our champions, because in blue we have the edits that are done in the database. This is separate from the infographic work they do and the outreach work they do. This is just looking at the curated content. And to contrast that, we have the number of edits from our record maintainers, remembering that record maintainers can only edit their own records, the ones for those resources they actually develop. So it's always going to be a slightly different number, because each record maintainer may only own 1 or 2 records, whereas our champions have carte blanche throughout the entire registry and can update whichever records are relevant to them and to their community. So between them, since the champion program began, which is sort of autumn 2022-ish, we've had over 500 updated records. Remembering we have only just over 4,000 records in the registry. So that's a really lovely addition from our community champions. We've had over 100 new records, and we've had, well, we're coming up on 4,000 edits from them. And it's just absolutely amazing. It's been a really fantastic route. Before I finish this talk, I want to bring it sort of, I hesitate to say full circle, that seems a bit trite, but I want to look at the mature section and the build relationship section together. Because what I want to say is that once you have a community, oh, look, my arrow. I think I lost an arrow there. I'll have to fix that before I give it to Connie. What you really want to get at is that when you have a community that you've established with the help of other communities, with the relationships that we've talked about before, that what you can't lose sight of is how important those communities still are to the one that you manage. And you need to keep on looking back and sort of refreshing your community by connecting and maintaining those connections with the existing communities that are out there. And there's a lot of really interesting work that can happen as a result. So taking that, I'd say, not only do you do this at the stage when you're creating your community, but when you feel you can finally take a breath and you can start looking outward again a little more, find those near neighbors again, continue to identify gaps in community knowledge and collaborations. Can your community help fill those gaps with outreach and education and engagement, and continue to foster collaborations and relationships with those other community. And we're all here to help each other. So we're all here to benefit each other. And one example I like to show is GBIF. This is a biodiversity consortium. And a few of our early adopter champions were member of GBIF, and they wanted to really explore the organization level relationships. So which organizations in biodiversity were creating resources, which ones were already connected through these resources and standards that they either use or develop, and where are the gaps in the organizational landscape. And they came to us hoping we could help. And we said, we can help, but what would be great is if you joined us as champions, curated some of the organizations that might be missing in relation to biodiversity, and then pull those right back out again using our API and build whatever tool you want. And this is the tool they've built, which generates an organizational relationship graph based on the information in the fair sharing registries, and allows them to see which organizations are highly connected, which maybe could do with additional connections, where there might be scope for further collaboration. And it was just a lovely, neat project that they did. Now we're back to the RDA persona quiz that Sarah made. And this is where I can see that we've had some chat about what people's personas are. And I would love to, I can see that some people have already posted. If anyone wishes to comment on the persona that they took, that they had, or wishes to just put into the chat what they are, it'd be lovely just to get an idea. And if you have any comments you wish to voice, by all means, please just pipe up. But Connie was a cat herder. That sounds appropriate for you, Connie. See how well your persona quiz works, Sarah. Would anyone like to comment on theirs, or I can just read a few bits in the chat here. Yes, I think we can all say thank you to Connie. I think what was the one with all of the MCU superheroes running, Sarah? Was that the wizard?
Let me check again.
I don't remember. But I do hope you've all had fun with this quiz. And the reason I included it is because I think knowing not only your style of engaging and communicating is important if you're going to be running a community, but also just understanding the styles of the people that are joining you. Oh yes, it's the wizards. Thank you. And I wanted to include, it's so nice that Sarah's here so she can answer if anyone has any particular questions, but she's in the process of writing a blog post, which I shamelessly stole this quote from, because it's so relevant. Yeah, so she says that RDA plays a pivotal role in creating a central place where people can gather to exchange ideas and to collaborate. And the RDA is a catalyst for knowledge dissemination. And that people can then come to the RDA and then take the nuggets of gold and jewels that they get from that and take it back to their own home communities. And this, I think, RDA and EOSC have allowed us to launch our own community in a way that wouldn't have been possible had we not stood on the shoulders of giants to help us do this. And I think that, you know, when I took the role that was both data quality and outreach, it seemed like a funny mix. But very soon I realized the importance of that sort of combination. It's the relationships and the quality of the data in our database, in our sort of, you might say, our project centric view, and also the relationships that we have as researchers and data scientists and RDM professionals that really help us elevate our work. And I had to finish with some fun. I am a keen board gamer, some of you know that already about me. To your, I don't know whether that's a good thing or bad thing in that context. And I just wanted to end by saying, have fun. Community engagement can be hard, and it can seem lonely at first when you're in that create stage and you're trying to gain traction. And it takes a lot of energy, but it is so worthwhile because everyone's interested, even if they don't always have the time that they would like to devote to a community project. They're interested, and they're interested just by turning up, like you guys have turned up today. And one way in which you can keep engagement, and I say this in the based on my own hobbies, is by making it fun. So when I was at the Gothenburg plenary, I brought a few board games, and I had a board game social one evening, and I was slightly worried I had messed up because I just said, let's everyone meet at the hotel bar. And then I had 20 people sign up for the board game social on the conference application. And I was suddenly worried that we wouldn't all fit at the bar, and it turned out to be perfect. We had about a dozen. This is a picture of a few of us playing one of my board games during the big conference dinner, but I can't tell you how important it was for building those social relationships that later formed into a number of different professional relationships and have helped in the community, make my community where it is today, as playing these sorts of games. And there's a lot of games that are themed around open science. There's Open Science Against Humanity, and if you know Cards Against Humanity, you'll know what that style of game is like, and you can play that online. There's also the same people have made an open access escape room and have made the data horror escape room and the software horror escape room. A different group of people have made the open access escape room, which includes physical components. So I still think the next time I go to a plenary, we're going to have an escape room in the plenary that people can book and do an open access escape room. I just think that'd be marvelous. And if you want to know what game we were playing on the right, it's a speed reaction game called Geistesblitz, and it's really fun. And I just want to say thank you all. Thanks to my community champions, our fair sharing working group, our data repository attribute working group, our operational team, and all of our advisors on our advisory board. And I'm happy to discuss and have any questions in the last few minutes, or go over anything else, or even more talk about the persona quiz, should you so desire. So I'll stop sharing just for now. And I'd love to have any comments that people might have. Thank you. I see Lindsay is here. I see some of our other champions are here. If there's anything you guys want to say into the stunned silence that we have here, I totally understand. It's pretty hard to speak up in one of these webinars, but if you have any comments or any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I'll say that you do set the bar for community engagement. So it's very fluid all the time. It's always well organized. It always goes well. So I could say I'm still learning from that aspect as well. So it's been really great.
Oh, Lindsay, you're very kind. You saw Lindsay, everyone else, in the slides that she provided for the talk today. And so she's been a fantastic member of the Champion program. We don't need any questions, Connie. If everyone is fully informed by the end of the presentation, then we don't have to do any further. But I just wanted to say thank you again to everyone. And of course, if you do, oh, look, Matti has a hand up. I missed that. Go ahead.
No, actually, so this was just sort of because you talked about the RDA Europe network, and then there's the champions on the other side. So question came to mind because there was this nice model of how you build a community. Do you have any thoughts on how you would merge two communities or get them to interact? Let's say that you have an existing network and you would actually like to bring it. So what is the introduction procedure and protocol and let's say the diplomatic procedures? Do you have a model for that?
Yes. I like that expression. You would have to be careful. I would guess that there's never an Venn diagram of communities. There would never be two completely overlapping circles anyway. And so what you need to do is find out which bits of the part where the two circles overlap. And that would probably be exploratory workshops or webinars, not webinars, because it'd be more of a discussion. Find out exactly what your goals are. And I think that sometimes this happens within the context of RDA, when some of the working groups end up doing work that other external RDA places really are keen on doing as well, and they end up coming into the working group as working group members, at least for that segment of the work. And I think that you do have to be a little careful and make sure that it's sort of an equal partnership, I would guess. But I've not had to do too much merging of communities. The benefit of RDA, of course, is that it's so inclusive. You don't necessarily have to merge communities. You bring community representatives in, and they have an equal voice in any of the work and the outputs that are happening. So within the smaller context that we're talking about here, RDA, EOSC, and fair sharing itself, that it's not an issue I've had, because it tends to be easy to bring people in for a particular task. That's a good question, though. Oh yes, RDA and RISA. That's right, Connie. That's a really good example. RISA being the software sort of instantiation, whereas RDA is for data. In fair sharing, we like to say we use the word data, but what we mean is almost any research digital object. And so we're happy to have, instead of a database, we'll have a software repository described in fair sharing. That's fine for us. And indeed, of course, you're right, there is overlap. There are working groups in RDA that deal with software. And of course, there's RISA itself that is looking mainly at software. And so it's an interesting situation, isn't it? I think they have to, the people in the working group, like I can't remember the name of it now. You'll remember it, Connie. The working group on software in RDA. I think they have members from RISA.
Yeah, I like this sort of Venn diagram. So I think it's sort of a workshop for the overlapping part, and then discussing in a way what is the optimal forum to host that.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, it's hard to know. I recommend icebreakers that involve social board games.
Okay, we need more of these sort of find your RDA person and so on.
We do.
Yeah, it needs to be part of the sustainable infrastructure.
Yes, that's right. Oh dear, and thank you very much, Sarah. That's absolutely lovely. You're saying some really nice things. Oh dear. Anybody else have anything else to say? Otherwise, I'm actually really pleased that we've sort of kept to time, and we haven't been rushed. We have Lindsay just adding a comment here. Oh, that's what she says. Yes, working communities, the core that you end up getting in a community are the core that seem most passionate about the work that they're doing. And I think that just naturally follows. It's not saying some people are less passionate than others. It's saying that people find their way to the right community. And so I know that when I joined RDA, and if you look on my profile on the RDA website, you see I'm a member of about a bajillion different working groups, but that doesn't mean that I am an active contributor on all of those working groups. I'm interested in them, but I'm naturally drawn to those areas where my passions lie the most, because you only have so much time. And I'm very happy to, have members who just are on mailing lists like I am for some of the working groups. And I think that's rather the joy of joining RDA, is that you can add yourself to every group that seems a little interesting, and then naturally over time you find the ones you're most passionate about, and you become part of that core for that part of the community. I don't see other hands raised, but yes, please do get in touch with Connie or have a look on the RDA website if you have any questions about how to get started at the RDA. It's such a low barrier that I would highly recommend at least perusing the list of working groups and interest groups, and just seeing if anything might tickle your fancy, because they're such a welcoming group. And on the whole, it's been a fantastic experience for most people I've talked to. And I think that we should encourage people from all sorts of different roles, not just professional roles, but also increasing the diversity in things in terms of location, geographical location, and background within the RDA. I think that's everything. We've hit nearly the top of the hour, and a couple of sneaky participants have dropped out, so it's probably the right time to say goodbye. Should we stop the recording? Oh, Wingspan.